Good afternoon. This is Mark Suckfield here interviewing Vietnam veteran Skip Saurman. I'm interviewing him from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Skip, where are you exactly again?
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Beautiful Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Actually, just outside of Santa Fe in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains.
Beautiful part of the country.
Yeah.
So we're here, and Skip's going to first elaborate on what his job was because his job is fascinating in itself, and he can, based on the research that I've conducted about it, but I feel that if he would elaborate on it for those that are going to see this interview and give a better idea of what he did, I think that that would be best. So, Skip.
Okay, I'd like to start out with a little intro about the Army Security Agency. It was kind of a unique outfit, and it was in the Vietnam War. It was a top secret outfit in the Vietnam War. Actually, if you asked anybody officially, they would say the Army Security Agency, better known as ASA, was not in Vietnam. In reality, the first person killed in Vietnam in 1961 worked for the Army Security Agency. So our history goes way back to 1961 in Vietnam. It actually started in 1945 at the end of World War II. It was originally signal intelligence, and then it got under NSA, the National Security Agency, and became the Army Security Agency. In Vietnam, it was known as the 3rd Radio Research Unit. Radio Research was kind of a code name for Army Security Agency. It later grew into the 509th Radio Research Group, and it was in direct support of MACV, the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam. We also supported the infantry, the armored cavalry, special forces units. What we did basically was radio intelligence. We would find them and they would plug them basically. So we were in direct contact with special forces and infantry troops and all that once we found the enemy positions. This was done through gathering usually Morse code, either Morse code or voice. And what we had were, see here what I find. We had voice intercept operators. They were 98Gs. They were called linguists or Monterey Marys because the linguist training for ASA was in Monterey, California. So they would intercept the voice transmissions. And then we had what we call bitty boppers, 058s, or later on 05Hs, we called them hogs. They intercepted Morse code. And these guys were good in that they could intercept and write Morse code like 60 words per minute, really fast. Once they identified who was transmitting and what they were transmitting, then the direction finders would come into play. These were the 05Ds or Duffies. That's what my MOS was. I'll expand more on that when we get into the question. But the Duffies used radio direction finding and triangulation in order to locate the position of the transmissions. And then we had communication security specialists, 05G goofies. We had crypto analysis technicians, 98 Crippies, 98Ds. We also had communication repair. We had our own MPs. Again, we had top secret clearances to do all this work, so we were heavily regarded anytime we were out there working. In order to triangulate enemy positions, we also had portable radio direction finding. And in 1961, Spec 4 James T. Davis was out on a portable radio direction finding team and was ambushed by Viet Cong, and that's how he got killed. So the PRD, or portable radio direction finding, was pretty dangerous. They converted that into ARD, which was aircraft radio direction finding. So we were picking up signals any way we could, either from stationary bases, from out in the field, transmissions from airplanes. All this gave us the intelligence to give to the troops to go out and find the enemy and disperse them. So the ASA was the first in 1961. They were also the last out in 1975. The last people to leave the country were Army Security Agency personnel because we had to keep up communications the whole time, all through the war. In 1977, ASA was merged with the United States Army Military Intelligence, and they created the United States Army Intelligence and Security Command, or INSCOM. So the Army Security Agency was only from 1945 to 1976. And to give you some numbers here, look at my notes. In 1969, near as I can tell, there was about 1 million United States Army personnel in the world. In that time frame, there was 30,000 Army Security Agency personnel in the world. So that's how small the unit it was, roughly about 3%. In Vietnam, in 1969, or all through the Vietnam War, I guess, there was 360,000 troops in Vietnam, and there were 6,000 Army Security Agency troops. You'll know in Vietnam we had about 58,479 deaths. Out of those, 91 deaths were for ASA personnel. At the time I was there in 1970 and 71, 20 ASA personnel died in Vietnam. So to say that our job was a little bit dangerous is kind of understandable looking at those kind of facts. Do you have any questions about the Army Security Agency before I go on?
Yeah, I think something that people probably wouldn't understand unless they have served per se. But would you say that a lot of people, particularly those in theater and throughout the Army, even while serving, do you believe that they had any idea what you guys did? Because your description, I mean, the importance of your job, it's immeasurable. It's that here's your mission, go out, we have to do this. That's as a result of you guys that you're giving us the intel, if I'm understanding you correctly, and you're out there in the field as well. So would you say that a lot of people had any clue what you guys were doing?
They did not, for two reasons. One, that we were such a small unit, and two, because we were all classified, top secret. So nobody really knew what we did. I have heard anecdotal stories from other ASA vets out there that they've been approached by special forces units and infantry units that have thanked them because they did know what we did. We also have a quote from a lieutenant colonel, I have it in my file somewhere, that, and I have to paraphrase it because I can't remember, it's kind of a long quote, but it basically says, there's a lot that goes on in a war, and thanks to you for what you do as far as intelligence and helping out the infantry units. So it is recognized. Unfortunately, we're not recognized as far as getting any kind of big medals or anything like that, or any big campaign, even though we were part of many campaigns. Some of our guys were directly interfaced with special forces, some of them even airborne and everything. And this was mostly in the early days.
Yeah, I think that society in general, and I know that this is kind of mixing some of the questions that I sent you. I think society in general, we tend to forget about the micro, like the small unit actions, such as what you were conducting over there. I think that they're I don't want to say they're more important. That's probably the wrong word, but they're certainly equally as important. And those big actions couldn't happen without guys like you guys in your unit. And I mean, the numbers that you said, and I'd forgotten them, but the numbers you said with the amount of people that were in theater and how small you were, I mean, it just, we're a macro society, right? We look at, so you guys, again, it's just amazing. Now, getting into some of these questions, did you?
Well, you do. The same can be said with the people that provide the food, the people that provide the logistics, the supplies, the MPs, all those people that are not 11Bs or on the front lines.
That's exactly. Thank you for making my point. That's exactly right, because it just, when you're young and you're 18 to 20, whatever, you tend to think that you're the most important job, particularly if you're out in the field and you're out. But I think as you get older, you realize how, the further away, the cooks were just as important as everybody else. Finance was just as, everybody was as important. Now, did you pick that job, or did that job pick you?
Well, that's an interesting story. Your first question wants to know, when did I join the service and how old I was. I was in high school in 1969. My senior year of high school was 68, 69. And I actually joined under delayed enlistment in February of 69 when I turned 18. My intention was I wanted to go in, but I wanted to pick the time when I went in. So I went in delayed enlistment, and my active service didn't start until August 1969. Now, what's interesting is my last 2 years of high school, I spent in an area vocational technical school. I went to school for automotive training. I had in mind to have an automotive career. I was into cars, 18 years old again. And interesting, the automotive instructor was in the Army Security Agency. And he mentioned it. He never had any stories or anything like that, but he mentioned it, numerous times that I had heard about the Army Security Agency. But when I went in, and here's the next one. The next question you have is, why did I join? What inspired me? It was 1969. The only thing you saw on the news was Vietnam. So what's an 18-year-old high school kid, with a background, too scared to be out on his own, not ready to be on his own, needed somebody to take care of him. So you join what I call Uncle Sam's Home for Lost Boys. My uncle was in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He was a Korean War vet, and I had a lot of respect for him. He owned a paving company. He built roads and things like that. And in Vietnam, in the combat engineers, that's where he got his training and stuff. So as an inspiration, I kind of looked at him when I joined the military. Matter of fact, I signed up for 3 years. Back then you could either join for 3, you could get drafted for 2. But I joined for 3 years because I wanted to be in the combat engineers. I want to be a heavy equipment mechanic with my automotive background. So you go down to the induction center and you get your physical and you take all these tests. And the recruiter comes over to you and says, "Hey, bud, come here. I want to talk to you about the Army Security Agency." And you say, "Well, what is it?" And he says, "Well, I can't tell you, but it's, it's the top 3%. And
so you scored off the charts, is what it's all right to tell us you're intelligent, Skip.
Right. It's like a used car salesman.
You were off the charts.
I don't know about off the chart, but I was up there, I guess, because they didn't go to everybody. And he tells me you get a top secret security clearance, you get to wear civilian clothes, all the cloak and dagger stuff, exotic duty stations, and there's no ASA in Vietnam. So to an 18-year-old, that sounds like, well, that's pretty safe. That's pretty good. Maybe I'll do that. Again, I had heard of ASA, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And all this stuff made it sound like I'd be in Germany or Japan or someplace safe and doing cloak and dagger stuff, being a spy. Didn't work that way. The other thing I want to mention is my draft number was 150. So I was going in one way or the other. It didn't matter. So that's how I ended up in the Army Security Agency.
So you said you were talking about 3 years. Did you decide you were going to re-enlist after that, or did you decide, you know what, I think I might just go home?
Well, this is one of the kicks is to join the Army Security Agency, you had to sign up for 4 years.
There you go.
So, again, I'm 18. My buddies got out. My buddies all joined the Air Force and the Marines, or I'm sorry, the Navy. They wanted to be in the clean military. So I figured they were in for 4 years. If I go in for 4 years, I'd get out the same time they do, and we'd start partying right where we left off. Of course, it didn't work that way. I lost track of everybody. Everybody lost track of me, and we never got together.
So after 4 years, your buddies, it was hard to stay in touch, and your buddies all went in for Air Force or Navy 3 years, but you were in an additional fourth year. They were home.
Well, I was supposed to be. I actually got out a year early, so I only spent 3 years in the military, which to me was a good thing.
So I'd imagine your job with your MOS, regardless of where you were never off. I mean, that's a pretty. I guess I'm asking, what was the intensity like in terms of work?
Well, we did have time off. Like you mentioned, it's 59 minutes of boredom and 1 minute of pure terror. That's about what it was here. We did have off. We worked long shifts. I can remember working a 36-hour shift once. At the end of that, I wasn't worth a dime, but we did long shifts. We did whatever the job required to get done. Because you couldn't just cut it off and say, well, I'm done. I'm going to go home now and take a nap. If you were in the middle of locating an enemy position, you didn't just give up in the middle of it. You had to find them. So the job was real intense.
What do you think you found most challenging about your job and your time in uniform?
I was in Vietnam from November 3, 1970 to November 3, 1971. Again, ASA was in direct support of MACV and infantry, special forces, and all that. So that was kind of exciting.
I probably should have asked you, and being the spawn of a Vietnam veteran and growing up in a neighborhood of Vietnam veterans. For example, my father was down on the Delta. He was at a place called Mito, and he was with the 75th MACV advisory team with the 9th, I believe it was the 9th ARVN, or was it the 7th ARVN? But where did you guys bounce around, or were you in one? I'd imagine with your job, you bounced around.
We did. I was stationed in the Trang, South Vietnam, which is about in the middle of the east coast of Vietnam.
Now, is that what history calls the Iron Triangle?
Yeah, it was above that.
Okay.
Yeah, the fighting, of course, went on all over Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
in the highlands, in the north, in the south, in the Delta. And what happened was we were based in the Trang. That was our main base. And the Trang was like a seaport town. Right now, if you looked it up, you'd see it's a luxury resort town. It's right on the coast, beautiful coast, beautiful water, everything. The problem was we had South Vietnamese working for us. We had South Vietnamese barbers, cooks, house cleaners, everything. And they worked for us. And being in the military and being somewhat religious, they were off on Sunday. So we didn't have any South Vietnamese workers there Sunday. So every Sunday morning we'd get shelled because they knew there wasn't any civilians there, so they said, well, let's just shake them up a bit. Let's harass them. And it was clear harassment because they were using light artillery, and I've got some pictures to show you at the end here if we have time or if you want to see them, where the shells landed at the edge of the base, basically. They never got past the edge of the base or anywhere dangerous to us, although you couldn't tell us that when we were 18, 19 years old and running around trying to find a place to hide. So we'd get shelled just about every Sunday morning. The other thing I want to say is in radio direction finding, it's based on triangulation. And I've got a picture to show you on that where you intercept a signal, say in the Trang, and you know that signal's coming from somewhere out there, but it's in a kind of a swath where you don't know where in that path where that signal is. So if you have another site that's shooting a signal, and they're hearing that same signal, and their path is the same swath, but it's out a different direction, and you get 3 or 4 or 5 of those signals, you can kind of triangulate that signal and pinpoint it. Plus, like I said, we have the advantage of putting a portable radio direction finding team out there or an air direction finding team out there to pinpoint it even more. So in order to do that kind of operation, you have to have so many sites. And I believe we had 14 sites in country. Now, I want to say, even though I have a top secret clearance, which has since been downgraded to secret, the stuff I'm telling you has been declassified since it's been 40 years ago and 50 years ago, and those sites are no longer there. But we had sites all over the country in order to triangulate signals. And what was interesting was, since they knew I knew something about cars, vehicles, that I should be in charge of convoys to set up those sites and supply them. So I see that as a good thing because I got out to see the country. I wasn't just in one base. And I was pretty much all over central Vietnam with a couple of trips up north and 1 or 2 trips down south. But that's what made it exciting for me and interesting. Again, I'm 19 years old. When I'm in Vietnam, I landed there being 19 years old. I turned 20 when I was there. And I had a 2.5-ton truck that I could drive anywhere I wanted and just, go to sites and help them get set up and help them work. So that was my basic job, other than direction finding. I do want to say, you started out talking about military family. My grandfather was in World War I, and he drove supply trucks and an ambulance in France in World War I, which that's how I met my grandmother and all this. My father was in the U.S. Army Air Corps before the Air Force came about in World War II. He was just stateside, but he rebuilt airplane power plants and rebuilt superchargers and things like that from planes. My uncle, as I mentioned, was in the Corps of Engineers, and he was in the Korean War for 3 years. So those were my inspirations, kind of come from a military family. I'd also talk about basic training and training before I went to Vietnam. Coming from a little town called Philadelphia, they send you to the nearest base to do basic training, so I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey. And Fort Dix was kind of like a Boy Scout camp compared to Fort Leonard Wood and some of the other places that were really harsh as far as climate and stuff like that. But it was challenging, being 18 at that time and going through basic training. Even though I was young and physically fit, I didn't really know what to expect. And I made a lot of friends, and it was a good experience. There was a lot of focus on Vietnam because, again, it was 1969. Vietnam was probably at its peak around 68, 69. So a lot of focus and basic training was for Vietnam, which, again, we were an Army security agency, so we figured, well, we're not going to Vietnam. We're going to be in Germany or Japan or someplace really nice. Didn't work out that way. My next training, my AIT, advanced training, was in Fort Devens, Massachusetts. I spent 10 months there learning Morse code, radio direction finding, cryptology, all this top secret stuff. We went to class in a vault, a room with no windows, and again, it was real secure. And then there was target orientation and training. That was in Two Rock Ranch, California. Interesting thing about ASA is our bases had names like Two Rock Ranch, Bent Hill Farms, and the local people didn't know what it was. Two Rock Ranch was just outside of Petaluma, and the locals thought it was a secret submarine base or something because it was right on the coast. But it was training for preparation for Vietnam, actually. again, keeping in line with the questions, my official MOS was an 05D20. What that is a special identification techniques operator. With additional schooling that I went to, I became an 05D30, which was a special identification techniques analyst. So I not only did direction finding, but I also analyzed, the information we got to pinpoint the locations. They trained me for over a year to do that job. When I got to Vietnam, I did it off and on for a few months, and then I started doing the convoys. So I'd say over half my time in Vietnam was spent doing convoys, while only maybe a third of my job was spent, doing what I was actually trained to do.
Did you ride on Highway 1?
You go up Highway 1 and turn left at Quinyon.
Yeah, my dad always talked about Highway 1, or he still does. He still does. That in the rain.
That was like the only road in Vietnam.
Yeah, that's a
Road in Vietnam.
Ton Sanut,
Yeah, I've got
Dan Rang.
Highway 1.
Yeah. What would you think your most challenging, or what was the most challenging aspect of your time in the service?
Again, I have to say Vietnam. Basically, I was in for 3 years, a little over. I was in training for a little over a year. I was in Vietnam for a year. I was doing whatever they wanted me to do for another year before I got out. The thing that I found most challenging about being in the service was somebody to tell you when to wake up, when to go to sleep, when and what to eat, when to take a break, and what to do all the time. Like I said, I went in as an 18-year-old that wasn't ready to go out on his own and get an apartment and live on my own. So Uncle Sam's Home for Lost Boys gave me some place to give me a blanket, give me a towel. But the way they controlled my life, I didn't really like that. So I was ready to get out when it came time to get out. Vietnam was a totally different experience because of Vietnam and coming from the sandbox, I'm sure you probably have the same feeling that you have a purpose there. You have a mission. And, you build buddies, you build dependencies and things like this that are really important. A lot of people I talk with don't understand why soldiers, especially in the Iraqi war and Afghanistan and stuff, they were going back for 3 or 4 tours. And people couldn't understand that. Why would you want to go back to a war zone? I fully understand it because, like I said, you have a purpose, you have a reason for being, and I put in there to go back for a second tour in Vietnam. When I came back November 3rd, 1971, I got sent to Vint Hill Farms, Virginia, and I put in a request right away to go back to Vietnam. I got all the way to Travis Air Force Base in California, all ready to get on the plane, and they pulled me off and said, "We're having cutbacks, you're going to Fort Hood, Texas." So I ended up in Fort Hood, Texas, and that's where I got my early out from. But I was fully ready to go back and do a second tour in Vietnam because even though it was challenging and dangerous and everything else, it's something you can't explain to people. It's something only another vet can understand, I think.
Right. Right. It's very poignant what you said, and it's something that unless you've gone through it, you just simply can't understand. And now they have a catchphrase for it, whether it be shared trauma or something else. But yeah, it's certainly something that we're lucky now that we have social media and cell phones. I mean, look what we're doing in this meeting. Like we've stayed connected since we've come home, and there's a reason why. I mean, it's just something you hit it. Nobody can understand it unless you've been through it. Do you remember coming home?
So let me, I want to talk about some different things here that you asked what a particularly difficult day in the service was.
Sure.
And I'm going to relate that to Vietnam. I want to tell a story about the last time I saw my mom, who was in a hospital bed in Berlin, New Mexico. And she was 82 years old and had really bad lung cancer and stuff. And she was on her way out. And she told me she was scared. She didn't know what to expect. Didn't know what was going to happen. So at that time, I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s or something. And I related to her back how I felt being in Travis Air Force Base in a big warehouse waiting to get on a plane headed to Vietnam. You didn't know what to expect. You didn't know what was going to happen. The first time we landed in Vietnam, that night, we sat on the steps of the barracks and listened to mortar fire not too far away. And again, being 19 years old, didn't know what to expect, didn't know what was going to happen the next day. Every day you lived in fear. When I got to do convoys, every time you left the base had a fairly secure perimeter, and there were quite a few personnel on base, so you felt somewhat safe there. But as soon as you left that gate to get on Highway 1 and go down the road, you realized you were on your own. Again, that feeling hits you that, it's not a safe place. I got to a point in the convoys where I was the only one who knew the way, so I got to drive the lead Jeep. Now, if you know about anything about convoys in a military situation, the first thing they're going to hit is that lead Jeep to stop the convoy, bunch it all up. So that was dangerous. I had a brand new in-country second lieutenant jump in the Jeep one day and loaded an M79 grenade launcher. And I said, "Sir, I'd like you to unload that." And he said, "No, I want to be safe." And I said, "I realize that, but I want you to unload that grenade launcher." And he said, "No, I'm not going to." And I said, "You'll have plenty of time to load it if we get hit, and you're laying in the ditch. You'll have plenty of time to load it and fire at that time." He said, "I'm not doing it, and if you don't let me do it, I'm going to find somebody else to drive this Jeep." So he gets out of the Jeep, and he goes back along the convoy, and he asks each driver in the convoy, "Will you drive?" And each one says, "No, won't do it." So he comes back to the Jeep, and he gets in, he doesn't say a word, he unloads the grenade launcher, and he sits down, and we take off. So that I thought was kind of funny. The other time you're scared to death is in Vietnam. You did 1 year, and then you rotated out. That last month, you're worried about, you did 11 months, you're not going to make it. That last month in Vietnam was scary for everybody because you just didn't know if that bullet had your name on it at that point. The other bad time in Vietnam for me was Christmas in 1970. That was my first Christmas away from home. So being with my buddies on the beach in Vietnam meant a lot. So that's all the bad stuff. You try to remember the good stuff and forget about the bad stuff.
Right. Yeah, we were gone 2 Christmases, and that was a big deal. I was 23, I guess, to 25 when I was going, the way my birthday hit. And you're right, it doesn't matter how old or how young you are. It's just like, yeah, we're not home.
You were an old man by Vietnam standards.
Yeah, I certainly was. I certainly was. Oh, man. Do you have anything that was really good or fun from your time in the service?
Like I said, we had good buddies. When we went to detachments, it was like seeing old friends again. And, if it was quiet, you could always play cards or party or whatever. And it was always fun. The best time I remember was right off the coast of Nha Trang was an island called Entree Island. and it was actually a Special Forces training center for the 5th Special Forces Group. So one day we rented a boat, a Vietnamese fishing boat, and we went out there. I don't know where we got the snorkeling gear from, but we went out there snorkeling and swimming and just having a good time. You can imagine boat buddies and beer. It was just a great time. You know, the water was crystal clear. One of the guys that was with us was actually a salvage diver from Michigan, and he was very knowledgeable about aquatic life and stuff like that. So he told us what snakes to stay away from and what animals to avoid and stuff. So that was probably the best time I can think of offhand.
Would you do it all over again if you could?
Yes, it would. The joke is that all of us ASA guys would go back to war, whether it was Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, it doesn't matter. We'd go back to war as long as they gave us plenty of beer and let us off at 2 o'clock for a nap. Like I said, I fully understand why soldiers want to go back to a war zone. It makes perfect sense to me, and we don't hesitate. We will go back in a heartbeat. But again, we have to feel like we're doing some good. Vietnam, as it turned out, was a political war, and we did not leave in the best of circumstances, I feel. Again, the joke there is we were wounded when I left. But I don't know what happened in April of 1975. I was also one of those guys that got yelled at and spitted on at the airport when we got back. One of the things that got me through Vietnam was my roommate over there. I was from Philadelphia, like I said, and my nickname was Philadelphia Kid. This friend of mine was a cowboy from New Mexico, and he got me to write to a girl out in New Mexico. And those letters kept me going for a year. So when I left Vietnam, I stopped in Albuquerque to see her and made a decision then that when I got out of the military, I was going to move to New Mexico. So I got stationed in Fort Hood, like I said, on my way out. And I bought my first new motorcycle and made numerous trips to New Mexico. Did numerous camping trips all along the way and everything else, and decided, you know, this is where I want to be. And that was 54 years ago now, 53 years ago, and I haven't looked back. It's like, this is where I want to be.
Excellent. Excellent.
I also kept to myself a lot. I couldn't watch a war movie for probably 10 years.
You know what's strange? I can watch war movies about any war but my own.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I have no idea why. I have no.
Well, it's funny to me because you go through different stages. And the first stage was, leave me alone, don't talk to me. I just want to live my life, be alone, be by myself. The second stage is, you know, I want to get out more, I want to socialize, I want to talk to people. And then you get in a stage where I actually want to search out other veterans. I want to be in a group. I want to see people, talk to people and stuff about it. And I do want to see wars and movies and stuff because I want to pick them apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and nothing in the war movies is right.
What do they say? The two worst people to watch an action movie with is a war veteran and a cop.
Yeah.
That wouldn't happen. That wouldn't happen.
It took me a long time to decide to do this interview. Again, my reasoning was that there's nothing exciting about it. Yeah, we went on convoys. Yeah, we got shot at. Yeah, we did this and that. But I wasn't a tunnel rat. You know, I wasn't a lerp. I didn't jump out of airplanes and things like that. So I don't feel myself being an exciting guy.
But you're an important guy.
Thank you.
You might not think that, but that job was, like I said, it's just as important as any other job. Saying that, would you recommend the young people of today, would you recommend that they join the military?
Most definitely. Um, Either military or some other service to get them out of the house, preferably out of the country, so that they can realize how good it is here in the United States. I was fortunate. I got into the automotive industry where I got to be a national trainer. So I went to places. I've been to Australia numerous times, Fiji Islands. I've been to Germany. I've been to Yemen. I've been pretty much all over and seen a lot of places and done a lot of things that makes it so good to come home to the United States and realize what we have here compared to what they have in other places. Young people don't appreciate that. They don't know about it. They don't appreciate it. And by doing either military or some other kind of service, I think it would make them understand that and make them realize it, I would hope.
I agree. No matter where I went in the world, I was always happy to come home.
No place like home.
And to piggyback off of that, obviously you thinking like that, there are probably lessons that we both have learned from our military service, which one of them is appreciation of what we have. Do you think that there's one lesson that you learned that you could impart on future generations or even anybody in your life? Because there's things that I know that I do, like youth sports. They're just sports. It's okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay. This isn't the end all for these kids. Look,
It's amazing to me because I'm 72 years old. I only spent 3 years in the military and only 1 year in Vietnam. But in that time frame, when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, I grew up so much that to this day, I can take care of myself. There's nothing I feel I can't do, and it all stems from that. It builds self-confidence. It just builds you. It makes you. And again, if you don't have that, I don't know what does make you. So it's hard to say to give that information to somebody else.
I like to say that, when it's a student or even my own kids, there are no bad days. There's just tough days, particularly if you've been in combat or you've been in theater. There's tough days, but we'll get through it. And I feel like
The sun always manages to come up the next day. There's two personal philosophies that I developed. And I won't say I developed them in Vietnam. I think they had their beginning in developing in Vietnam. But sometime after Vietnam, I came up two personal philosophies that I've lived by all my life. One is that the only thing I truly own, the only thing that's really mine is my body and my mind. So if I'm going to take care of something, that's what I'm going to take care of. The other philosophy is that the only thing that matters in this world is kids. And by kids, I mean anybody younger than me, anybody that's coming up behind me to take over. That's what's important. Not all this other stuff that we argue about and deal with. Those two things, taking care of my body and taking care of kids, are the two things that mean a lot to me. That's why I became a teacher, and probably that's why you became a teacher. It's all about the kids. I was lucky enough to get married after I left Vietnam, after I came home in 1973, and I had a kid. That was the greatest thing in the world. I was also lucky to get divorced and get remarried, and through that marriage have two more kids, and that was even greater. And now I've got 5 grandkids. The first one was amazing. The second one was still cool. The third one is, hey, I'm getting pretty old. The fourth one is I'm getting really old now, and the last one was like, is this for real? But it's the greatest thing in the world to have kids and grandkids.
Well, you're leaving a great legacy. So, I mean, they're lucky to have you, I'm sure. This one's, I mean, I guess it's easy to answer, but how did you see the military change during your time in service, and how has it changed since you have served?
I saw a slide a while back that showed this was actually a World War II veteran and the equipment they had, and a Gulf War veteran and all the equipment they have. And the cost difference and the amount of equipment difference and the technology difference was just amazing. I'm with a group called the Old Spooks and Spies, and we have an annual reunion. And we had a reunion a few years back in Fort Carson, Colorado. So we got to spend some time on base and eat with the troops and talk with the troops and all this. And it was really amazing to talk with them, and they were like little kids. They didn't have a mess hall. They actually had a food court where they had Burger King and Pizza Hut. And
Yeah, we're pretty lucky.
Yeah, it was amazing to us.
Believe it or not, in basic training, I think I was the first cycle in 2000 because I did delayed entry. I was May of 2002. We didn't have to do KP. It was all civilian contracted.
Yeah. The only time I did KP was in Travis Air Force Base waiting to go to Vietnam. I did one day of peeling potatoes, and that was it. Now they got machines that do all that stuff.
So you would say mainly equipment.
I think when it comes to doing a mission, I think it's the same thing. I don't know if they all have that mindset, but I hope so. Their living conditions, I'll say, are way different, way easier. Again, I go back to the Boy Scout scenario where it's like a Boy Scout camp now.
I would think that, and it's not good or bad, and I hope I keep this mindset as I get older, but I would think that a lot of that has to do with it's an all volunteer force now. I mean, the competitive wage that an 18-year-old could get now, it's pretty good in my opinion. I mean, the military pays a fair wage now.
I have concerns about the physical fitness of youth today.
I would agree. We are, I try to force my kids out. I put a zip line in my backyard just to get them moving. But we're fortunate in my neighborhood that our kids, all the parents are on board, get out of the house. So I think that that's changing a little bit. I hope. That's what I'm just trying to, you never do everything right as a parent, but I'm certainly trying. And we're talking about some of the things. Do you think that there is something that we need to do to bridge the military civilian divide? Do you think that that's a problem?
I don't know about the divide. I don't think if there is a divide that you're never gonna bridge the gap with most people that haven't experienced it. If they've even been overseas, say in the Peace Corps or something, or even visited or been an exchange student in France or something like that, if they even did that, I think they might be close to understanding.
Do you think that I'm sorry for interrupting. Do you think that that's regardless if you do something, if you're sacrificing a little bit of yourself on behalf of anything in anybody, and the military may do it more than others, do you think that would, the Peace Corps, for example, if you're going and you're helping people and because I believe President Bush wanted to do something to have it wasn't a mandate or it wasn't a draft, but he was trying to in 2000, after 9/11, to try to get kids to do a service to their country or on behalf of their country, and it didn't have to be the military. Do you think that is that something similar to what you were thinking?
Yeah, just something to get them involved. There's a student organization I'm involved with called Skills USA, and it's for students that are in trade and technical classes, such as automotive or welding or building trades or whatever. And those students go through training and experiences that I think benefit them far more from somebody that hasn't been in a student organization. So if they'd all just join a student organization, if they'd all just get involved with something, Habitat for Humanity or anything, something to understand that the world's bigger than just them. I think that's what's important, especially for the kids.
I think you just answered the last question. What do you think civilians can learn from veterans or active military servicemen and women?
Before I get in that, the one thing I want to say is that, I was one of those that was spit on and cursed at in the airport and stuff coming back from Vietnam. And now it's completely opposite. Now when you were afraid to wear your uniform before, but you had to get on standby and stuff. Nowadays, I've got a hat, I've got decals on my car, whatever, and I can't tell you how many times I've been thanked for my service now. That has turned around, I think, since 9/11, and I'm kind of glad to see that. On one hand. On the other hand, there's a lot of discussion in some of the forums talking about how do you respond to that? How do you deal with that? Thank me for my service, but let me tell you about it. Let me try to tell you how important it was, stuff like that. So that's a tough one. As far as what they can learn from veterans, again, I'm a man of few words. I'll say respectfulness, integrity, and honor. I've got to sign off now on a lot of my emails and stuff, and kind of my mantra for 2024 is to stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Because like I say, no matter what happens, the sun's going to come up tomorrow. No matter who gets elected, the sun's going to come up tomorrow. Whether I'm here on this earth or I die, the sun's going to come up tomorrow. So it's like, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy.
Well, I just I try to say this to every Vietnam veteran or every veteran that I meet, particularly of your age. Not that you're that much older than me, but we were just carrying the torch that you guys carried from the predecessors before you, and we, as a country, thank you for your service. And there's nothing that we could ever do to repay you for that debt. Every Vietnam veteran that I see, and I learned this from my dad, and from the time I was young, I tell them, welcome home. And to your point when you were speaking of earlier, welcome home. We owe you. It was an honor to wear the same uniform that you wore. It was an honor to speak to you today. It was an honor to learn about the ASA. And now this will be forever in cyberspace. So, but you were the greatest of your generation. In the still words from Joe Galloway, you guys were tigers. You guys answered the call. Not everybody did. And we will forever owe your generation, particularly those in uniform, a debt of gratitude that will never be repaid.
You'll be where I'm at before you know it. It was fast. Let me give a shout out to a couple of organizations I'm with. I already mentioned Old Spooks and Spies. Most of those guys were over there in the early 60s, but they're all good guys, and we're losing them one by one, just like we're losing World War II vets, Korean vets now. The other organization I'm involved with is called the Veterans Last Patrol. They're out of South Carolina, and they work with veterans to go to veterans' homes or hospices where all veterans are, not going to be around long, and just to talk to them, just to share stories with them and talk with them. I just now got involved with them just this past year, and really good organization. I mean, just a chance to go into a home and talk to somebody that doesn't have anybody to talk to is really unique. The last one is, I don't know if you know this, but the first National Vietnam Veterans Memorial was not in Washington, D.C. It was in Angel Fire, New Mexico. And Angel Fire is about 3.5 hours from here. I go up there at least twice a year, Veterans Day and Memorial Day. But it's a beautiful memorial, and not just the Vietnam vets, but they've opened up to all the veterans. Across the highway, they want to build a memorial for the War on Terror vets. They also have a veteran cemetery there, which just opened up last year, which is where I intend to be in my final days. So
Well, take your time getting there, Skip.
If you ever come out here, let me know, and I'll get you up there. You want to see some pictures?
Sure. Let's put them on.
This just shows my rank and time in service and MOS and all that stuff. Some of my medals and all. Up here in the upper left-hand corner is our insignia. We call that the LFCF, the Lightning Fast Chicken Fucker. My patches in Vietnam, of course, were subdued. We were in the 509th Radio Research Group, part of the 313th Radio Research Battalion, and the 330th Radio Research Company. Everybody in ASA that went through Vietnam went through Davis Station first. This is the 509th Transient Detachment in Saigon. This is my home in the Trang. You can notice the sandbags and stuff around it. And of course, we had our mama-san. We had our mama-san do the cleaning and stuff. We had our pets. A lot of dogs in Vietnam. We had a dog that kept having puppies. My Ho Chi Minh sandals made out of Jeep tires. The other pet we had was, we were right next to the 101st Snake Platoon. So we had 2 pythons. We had a 10-foot python and an 8-foot python. You see how close we were to the water, which was really nice. The beach was just, a jump down the road. On the other side was the mountains behind us. This is where we get shelled from. We could never find them, though. They'd be up in the mountains. They'd do about 10, 15 shells, and then they'd hide. This is our perimeter. Again, these are the mountains behind us. And I can remember being on guard duty there and just hurting my eyeballs just looking for something out there. This is downtown the Trang. You can see all the new cars, the bikes. We weren't allowed to ride these. We got caught riding in these, we get court-martialed. This is a French restaurant. You know, the French were in Vietnam before the Americans were, and they left behind some really good restaurants. This is the seafood wharf. The best part of the Trang was the beach. We did have time off to go up and down the beach and enjoy the water. And this was Christmas Day, 1970, like I said, on the beach. Mama-san would bring the pineapples, and we'd sit around and do our thing. So it's all about the kids. This was an orphanage just north of the Trang that we visit quite often. And, you know, if you took a picture of 3 of them, they would tear off 2 of them out of the picture. But if you took a picture of more than 3, it was okay. Thought that was interesting. I never did see Bob Hope bars in Vietnam. The best we got was a flatbed trailer with Filipino musicians on it. and a Filipino dancer. And we didn't have chairs. This is where we sat. Okay, here's a map of Vietnam. This right here is Nha Trang. I don't know if you can see my pointer or not.
Mm-hmm.
But we had detachments up here at Quy Nhon, Phu Cat, Pleiku, Ban Ma Tui. We had one down here at Ben Hoa, and one up here at Phu Bai. We even had some out here in Thailand. So, like I said, with triangulation, you might pick up a signal in the Trang, and might pick up the same signal in Ban Ma Tui or in Pleiku, and between those shots, you could identify an area right there. That's actually a pretty big area. So you did another shot from Quy Nhon, another shot from Phu Cat to narrow that down even smaller. And then if you got a PRD team out there or an airplane come by and shoot it, you can really narrow that down. This was getting ready for convoy. This is the staging area. These are some of the trucks we used. This is my shotgun. Mike, and I can't come up with his last name for some reason, but this is Mike. And like I said, when you left camp, that's when it felt dangerous, as soon as you got past that gate. These are 2.5-ton trucks, or deuce and a halves, and this was the bulk of our convoy. Driving through some of the small towns in Vietnam, really narrow roads, and you didn't know what was going to happen driving through town. Depending on what we were hauling, we had gun trucks with us, or we had aircraft with us. Usually over the mountain passes, we'd have an helicopter with us. And this is the lead Jeep that I drove, 50 caliber. Sometimes before we headed up to the mountain pass, we'd have to wait until they cleared the pass. If they just had a previous convoy go through that got hit, they had to clear the road and everything. And when they clear it, then we could start up the road. This is Highway 1, by the way. Or no, this is Highway 19, I think it is, from Quy Nhon to Pleiku. There's two passes. There's Minh Nhing Pass and An Khê Pass that were really dangerous. This is near the top of the pass. You can see some of the Agent Orange and stuff that was used to kill the trees. This is kind of a better picture of it. This is coming close to Pleiku now with the mountain village. It's not this on the run. I happen to get 3 of them in that one. I've got a mountain yard crossbow actually from one of these guys. This one was Detachment 8. Ban Ma Tui was Detachment 2. I think Phu Cat was Detachment 3. Can't remember all those though. And this is right outside of Pleiku. This is one of the trucks. This was another base down the road. You saw the perimeter in the Trang. This was the perimeter in some of those highland bases where, you know, all you had was different strands of barbed wire. We had claymores behind these sandbags to blow out. The amazing thing to me was we would find those claymores turned around, and we never saw anybody, never saw anything. What they would do is take off their clothes so they wouldn't get snagged in the barbed wire, and they'd come through this barbed wire naked and then turn the claymores around and then sneak back out just to harass us. This is a PRD unit, portable radio direction finding. Notice the antenna a little bit different. And they can be set up anywhere. They can be set up along the road. They can be set up out in the field. Set them up in rice paddies. Wherever we are, wherever we needed it, they would set them up. My last couple of months in Vietnam, I was on courier duty. So you jumped in anything that would move to, you know, get some information up to Da Nang or down to Chu Lai or wherever. And C-130s were popular. These things would take off and go straight up and come straight down and land in like a football field. Of course, we got in helicopters every now and then. That was always fun. To this day, I won't ride in a helicopter again. This is just to show you the 509th Radio Research Group. And again, we were supportive of MACV, which is the Military Assistance Command. They were in support of the 2nd Field Force, the 403rd Special Operations Detachment, 5th Special Forces. Down here, the 330th, we were tied in with the 1st Field Force. We also tied in with the 101st, the 4th Infantry, and 1st Air Cav. So those were all the units that we supported. This is Old Spooky. This is kind of our mascot. And we're trying to get a monument in the Arlington National Cemetery. That's proven to be kind of difficult because they claim they don't have any room. But this is a relatively small monument, and we're trying to get it placed in there. And this is Angel Fire, New Mexico. This was built by a retired dentist that had bought this land to build a resort. And in the process of building the resort one day, they came to him and told him his son was killed in an ambush in Vietnam. His son was in the Marines. And he decided to take the money for the resort, the insurance money, and build this chapel in honor of his son. And he opened it up to all veterans. It became a state park for a while. It became it was turned over lately now to the New Mexico Department of Veterans. But it's a fantastic place. It's a spiritual place. And that's that.
Well, again, Skip, thanks for your time. I mean, this is, to me, it's very, very, well, to everybody, it's very important, and we appreciate you taking the time.
If you have any use for it, I can send that PowerPoint to you, or I can send you my story about my Bronze Star. I just did that here a while back.
You can email me whatever you want, and I will send it up for perpetuity to the Veterans Breakfast Club.
Okay, we can do that. Yeah, I just kind of like to get it out there. It's kind of interesting because the way the wife is, she looks ahead at things, and she knows that we're not going to live forever, so she's starting to identify things to give to the kids and all this kind of stuff. And my own kid, wants my Vietnam medals and all that kind of stuff, so it kind of surprised me and pleased me that she'll get all that. And maybe I'll send her the transcript from this, who knows.
Well, I appreciate you, Skip.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for your service.
No, you don't have to thank me, but I appreciate it.